The elegant mansion stood empty on the hill, its windows darkened like closed eyes. The gardens, once tended with love, now grew wild with neglect. But behind this decay lay a story of betrayal, a tale of an elderly woman cast aside by the very person who should have protected her, and a revenge plot so perfectly executed that it would take 12 years to fully unfold. This is the story of Eleanor Blackwood and the grandson who abandoned her. A story of patience, a story of justice, a story that will leave you speechless. Eleanor Blackwood was born into wealth in 1930. Her family owned vast properties across 3 counties. The centerpiece of their fortune was Blackwood Manor, a sprawling estate with 20 rooms and gardens that stretched for acres. Everyone in town knew the Blackwoods. They were respected, they were powerful, they were untouchable. By her 80th birthday in 2010, Eleanor was the last of the Blackwoods. Her husband had passed away 15 years earlier. Her only daughter died in a car accident in 1985. The only family Eleanor had left was her grandson, Michael, a charming young man of 35 who had his grandmother wrapped around his finger since childhood. The staff at Blackwood Manor noticed the changes in Eleanor first. The once sharp and commanding woman began forgetting small things. She would misplace her reading glasses. She would ask the same questions repeatedly. Her hands trembled slightly when she poured her morning tea. The doctor confirmed what everyone suspected. The early stages of dementia were setting in. Eleanor needed care and supervision. Michael visited his grandmother more frequently after the diagnosis. He sat with her in the grand library of Blackwood Manor. He listened to her stories about the past. He nodded with apparent concern when she spoke of her fears for the future. The staff thought his devotion was touching. Eleanor believed her grandson truly cared for her well-being. They were all deceived. On a cold November morning in 2010, Eleanor woke to find strangers in her bedroom. 2 attendants from Pinewood Retirement Home stood beside her bed. They explained they were there to help her move to her new residence. Eleanor was confused. She had never discussed moving to a retirement home. She called for Michael. The attendants told her that her grandson had arranged everything. He had signed all the necessary paperwork. Eleanor had no choice. Pinewood Retirement Home was not the luxurious senior living facility that Michael had described to the family lawyer. It was a state facility on the outskirts of town. The building was old and poorly maintained. The rooms were small. The staff was overworked and underpaid. The food was bland and repetitive. This was where Michael had decided his wealthy grandmother would spend her final years. The staff at Blackwood Manor was dismissed with minimal severance. The mansion was locked up. Michael told everyone that his grandmother had chosen to live in a top retirement community for her own safety. He said the mansion would remain untouched until Eleanor decided what she wanted to do with it. People believed him. Why would they not? He seemed like such a caring grandson. Eleanor tried to contact her family lawyer from Pinewood. She was told he was unavailable. She tried to call old friends. They never received her messages. She wrote letters that were never delivered. After 3 months of attempts, Eleanor realized the truth. She had been effectively imprisoned, cut off from her resources, separated from her wealth, abandoned by the only family she had left. The other residents at Pinewood noticed Eleanor was different from them. Despite her simple clothes and her new circumstances, she carried herself with dignity. She spoke with the refinement of old money. She treated the overworked staff with kindness and respect. She never complained about her situation. Instead, she watched. She listened. She began to form a plan. While Eleanor adjusted to life at Pinewood, Michael wasted no time. He moved into Blackwood Manor the very day his grandmother was taken away. He began selling off valuable paintings and antiques. He hosted extravagant parties in the grand ballroom. He invited business associates to hunt on the extensive grounds. He lived like a man who had already inherited his fortune. he never visited Eleanor, not even once. Michael believed his plan was perfect. He had convinced the family doctor to declare Eleanor mentally incompetent. He had presented forged documents to the family lawyer showing Eleanor had granted him power of attorney. He had redirected her mail and changed her phone number. As far as the world was concerned, Eleanor Blackwood was a confused old woman who needed protection from herself. Michael was simply a devoted grandson shouldering that burden. The truth was far different. Eleanor had indeed begun experiencing memory issues, but she was far from incompetent. The diagnosis had frightened her enough to make her vulnerable to Michael's manipulation. She had trusted him completely. She never imagined he would use her moment of weakness to seize control of everything she owned. At Pinewood, Eleanor befriended a nurse named Sarah. Sarah was young, barely 25, but she had a kindness that many of the other staff members lacked. She took extra time with the residents. She listened to their stories. She treated them with dignity. Eleanor saw something special in this young woman. She saw an ally. During the night shift, when the facility was quiet, Eleanor would tell Sarah stories about Blackwood Manor. She described the rose gardens her husband had planted for their anniversary. She talked about the library, with first edition books collected over generations. She spoke of the family portraits that lined the grand staircase. Sarah listened with fascination. She believed these were simply the wistful memories of an elderly woman. She did not realize Eleanor was sharing these details for a very specific purpose. 3 months after arriving at Pinewood, Eleanor asked Sarah for a favor. She wanted to send a letter to an old friend. She claimed the nursing home staff had been too busy to help her with this simple request. Sarah agreed, without hesitation. She mailed the letter the next day. She had no idea this seemingly innocent act would set in motion a plan 12 years in the making. The letter was addressed to Harold Winters, a man Eleanor had known since childhood. Harold was not just an old friend, he was also one of the most respected attorneys in the state. He specialized in estate law. He had handled the Blackwood family affairs for decades before retiring. When he received Eleanor's letter, he was shocked by its contents. Eleanor explained her situation in clear and coherent terms. She outlined the steps Michael had taken to isolate her. She requested Harold's help in reclaiming what was rightfully hers. Harold moved quickly. He visited Pinewood Retirement Home the very next day. He found Eleanor lucid and composed, far from the confused woman Michael had described. Harold arranged for an independent medical evaluation. The new doctor confirmed what Eleanor had claimed. She showed some signs of cognitive decline, but she was fully capable of making her own decisions. Harold filed emergency petitions with the court. Within 2 weeks, Eleanor's power of attorney was restored to her. Michael was caught completely off guard when served with legal papers. He had assumed his grandmother would live out her remaining years in obscurity. He never anticipated she would fight back. He hired expensive lawyers to challenge the ruling. He claimed Eleanor was being manipulated by opportunists. He presented the forged documents as evidence of her previous wishes. The legal battle dragged on for months. During this time, Eleanor remained at Pinewood. She chose not to return to Blackwood Manor immediately. She had a different strategy in mind. With Harold's help, she began making discreet inquiries about properties for sale in the area. She reviewed her financial statements. She consulted with architects and contractors, all while Michael believed he was winning the legal fight to maintain control of her estate. The court finally ruled in Eleanor's favor in late 2011. Michael was ordered to vacate Blackwood Manor. He was required to provide a full accounting of all assets he had liquidated. He was forbidden from accessing any of Eleanor's accounts. The family lawyer who had been complicit in the scheme faced disbarment. The doctor who had falsified Eleanor's medical records lost his license. Michael was furious. He had spent most of the money he had taken. He had made enemies of the family's old friends. He'd burned bridges with business associates who now saw him as untrustworthy. He was forced to move into a small apartment in the city. His carefully constructed world of wealth and privilege collapsed around him. Eleanor did not return to Blackwood Manor as everyone expected. Instead, she made a decision that surprised even Harold. She put the estate up for sale. The mansion that had been in her family for generations, the gardens her husband had lovingly maintained, the library, filled with priceless books. All of it would go to the highest bidder. The local community was shocked. People whispered that Eleanor had become bitter and vindictive. They said she was selling her heritage out of spite. They claimed her mental state must be worse than previously thought. No one understood the true purpose behind her decision. No one except Eleanor and Harold. Blackwood Manor sold for $12 million in January 2012. The buyer was a foreign investor who planned to convert the property into a luxury hotel. Eleanor signed the papers from her small room at Pinewood. She instructed Harold to place the proceeds in a series of blind trusts. The purpose of these trusts remained known only to Eleanor and her trusted attorney. For the next 10 years, Eleanor continued to live at Pinewood Retirement Home. She could have moved to any luxury facility in the country. She could have purchased a new mansion. She had the resources to live however she wished. Yet she chose to stay in the modest state facility. She formed deep friendships with the other residents. She became a beloved figure among the staff. She donated books to the small library. She funded improvements to the common areas. She never spoke of her wealth or her former life. Sarah remained Eleanor's closest friend at the facility. She eventually became the head nurse. She implemented many changes that improved the quality of life for the residents. She never knew that the anonymous donations that funded these improvements came from Eleanor herself. Eleanor preferred to keep her generosity secret. She had learned the value of patience and discretion. Michael struggled in the years following his eviction from Blackwood Manor. He moved from job to job. He accumulated debt. He made poor investment decisions. He blamed his grandmother for his misfortunes. He told anyone who would listen that she had destroyed his life out of senility and spite. Few people believed him. His reputation was permanently tarnished by his treatment of Eleanor. In early 2020, the economic downturn hit Michael particularly hard. He lost his job at a financial services company. His apartment was foreclosed. His car was repossessed. At 45 years old, he found himself homeless, too proud to seek help from the few friends he had left, too stubborn to admit his failures were of his own making. It was during this lowest point that Michael received an unexpected letter. It came from a place called New Beginnings Senior Care Center. The letter informed him that he had been approved for residents at their facility. All expenses would be covered by an anonymous benefactor. The letter explained that New Beginnings was a unique institution. It provided housing for individuals who had nowhere else to go, regardless of age. The only requirement was participation in the community support program. Michael was suspicious, but he was also desperate. With winter approaching and no other options, he reluctantly accepted the offer. He packed his few remaining possessions and took the bus to the address provided in the letter. He had no idea he was walking into the final chapter of a story that began 12 years earlier. New Beginnings Senior Care Center was nothing like Pinewood Retirement Home. The facility was modern and well-designed. The grounds were beautifully landscaped. The common areas were spacious and filled with natural light. The private rooms were comfortable and tastefully furnished. The staff was attentive and professional. Michael was astonished by the quality of the place that had inexplicably offered him residence. The director who greeted Michael introduced herself as Ms. Green. She was a slim woman in her late 30s, with kind eyes and a formal manner. She explained the rules of New Beginnings. Residents were expected to contribute to the community according to their abilities. Some taught classes in their areas of expertise, some helped in the gardens, some assisted with meal preparation. Everyone had a role to play in making the center function as a true community. Michael was assigned a room in the East Wing. The accommodations were simple but comfortable. He was introduced to his neighbors, mostly elderly individuals who had been abandoned by their families or had outlived all their relatives. There were also a few younger people with similar stories. To Michael, people who had fallen on hard times and had nowhere else to go. For the first few weeks, Michael kept to himself. He was embarrassed by his circumstances. He was uncomfortable living among people he would have previously considered beneath his social standing. He participated in the required community activities. With reluctance, he performed his assigned tasks with minimal effort. He remained aloof from the other residents. Ms. Green observed Michael's behavior with quiet patience. She never reprimanded him for his attitude. She never threatened to revoke his residency. She simply watched and waited, just as Eleanor had done at Pinewood 12 years earlier. 3 months into his stay, Michael was assigned to help in the administrative office. His task was to organize the filing system. The work was tedious but straightforward. As he sorted through folders of financial records, Michael noticed something unusual. The funding for New Beginnings came primarily from a single source, a foundation called Second Chances. Further investigation revealed that Second Chances had been established in 2012, the same year Blackwood Manor had been sold. Michael began to pay closer attention to the details of New Beginnings. He noticed that many of the architectural features resembled those of his grandmother's mansion. The layout of the gardens followed a similar pattern to those at Blackwood Manor. The library contained several volumes that looked familiar. Even some of the furniture in the common areas reminded him of pieces from his childhood visits to his grandmother. Curiosity turned to suspicion. Michael started asking questions about the history of New Beginnings, about its founder, about the mysterious benefactor who had arranged for his residency. The staff deflected his inquiries with polite but firm responses. They suggested he focus on his own progress in the program. They reminded him that everyone at New Beginnings deserved privacy and respect. Michael's breakthrough came during a conversation with one of the elderly residents, a woman named Margaret who had been at New Beginnings since its opening. She mentioned casually that she had previously lived at Pinewood Retirement Home, the same facility where Michael had sent his grandmother. Margaret spoke of a woman who had befriended her there, a woman who had promised that things would get better, a woman named Eleanor. The pieces began to fall into place. Michael requested access to the records of the Second Chances Foundation. His request was denied. He attempted to search online for information about the foundation. He found only vague descriptions of its charitable work. He tried to contact his old associates in the financial world for information. None would speak to him. Then in April 2022, Michael received a letter. It was delivered to him personally by Ms. Green. The envelope was high quality, the kind Eleanor had always used for her correspondence. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Even after 12 years, Michael recognized his grandmother's elegant script. Ms. Green informed Michael that Eleanor Blackwood had passed away peacefully the previous week. She had left specific instructions that this letter be delivered to him upon her death. Miss Green left Michael alone in the garden to read the final words from the grandmother he had betrayed. The letter was dated January 15, 2022, 3 months before Eleanor's death. The paper was the same cream stationery she had always preferred. The ink was the same blue she had always used. But the words revealed a truth that Michael had never suspected. Eleanor began by acknowledging their shared history. She recalled the summers Michael had spent at Blackwood Manor as a child. She mentioned the education she had funded, the opportunities she had provided. The love she had given unconditionally, she did not write with bitterness. She wrote with the clarity of someone stating simple facts. Then she explained what had happened after Michael had abandoned her at Pinewood, how she had regained control of her estate, how she had sold Blackwood Manor, how she had used the proceeds to create something new, something meaningful, something that would outlast both of them. The $12 million from the sale of Blackwood Manor had been used to purchase and renovate what was now New Beginnings Senior Care Centre. The facility had been specifically designed to serve those who had been abandoned or forgotten by their families. Eleanor had personally overseen every detail of its creation. From the layout of the buildings to the training of the staff, she had created a true community for people who had nowhere else to go. Eleanor revealed that she had continued to live at Pinewood even after establishing New Beginnings. She had chosen to remain there to honor the friendships she had formed. She had used her influence to improve conditions at the state facility. She had worked with Sarah to implement programs that enhanced the quality of life for all residents. She had found purpose in helping others who shared her experience of abandonment. The most shocking revelation came near the end of the letter. Eleanor explained that she had been following Michael's life from a distance. She had watched his decline with sadness but not surprise. She had anticipated that his reckless behavior and sense of entitlement would eventually lead him to ruin. She had instructed her attorneys to offer him residence at New Beginnings when he reached his lowest point. Michael had been living in a facility created by the very grandmother he had discarded. He had been receiving the care and support she had designed. He had been given a second chance by the person he had betrayed most cruelly. The anonymous benefactor who had saved him from homelessness was Eleanor herself. The letter concluded with Eleanor's final wishes. She informed Michael that he could remain at New Beginnings indefinitely, under one condition: he must continue to contribute to the community. He must learn to serve others as he had never done before. He must understand the value of compassion and the importance of treating every person with dignity, regardless of their age or circumstances. Eleanor had arranged for the second chances foundation to continue funding New Beginnings in perpetuity. The facility would never lack for resources. It would continue to serve those in need long after both Eleanor and Michael were gone. It was her legacy, a testament to her belief in the power of forgiveness and the possibility of redemption. The final paragraph of the letter contained words that would haunt Michael for the rest of his life. Eleanor wrote that she had forgiven him long ago, not for his sake, but for her own. She had not created New Beginnings out of vengeance. She had created it out of love. Love for the countless individuals who would find shelter within its walls. And yes, even love for the grandson who had once abandoned her. She signed the letter simply, Grandmother. As Michael looked up from the pages in his hands, he saw the world around him with new eyes. The gardens he had helped tend, the rooms he had helped clean, the people he had gradually come to know. All of it was the result of Eleanor's vision. All of it existed because she had refused to be defined by the worst thing that had happened to her. She had transformed her pain into purpose. Michael realized that Ms. Green must have known the truth all along. She had been implementing Eleanor's plan, watching him, evaluating his progress, determining whether he was capable of change. He wondered how many of the staff knew his true identity. How many of the residents were aware of his connection to the founder of New Beginnings? The thought filled him with shame. For the first time in his life, Michael understood the full measure of what he had thrown away. Not just the material wealth of Blackwood Manor, but the wisdom, the love, the example of a woman who had faced betrayal with dignity and responded with extraordinary generosity. He had never deserved her forgiveness, yet she had given it freely. The days following Eleanor's revelation were the most difficult of Michael's life. He considered leaving New Beginnings, running away from the evidence of his grandmother's magnanimity, starting over somewhere else where no one knew his story. But where would he go? What would he do? And more importantly, what would that say about him? Would he abandon Eleanor's legacy just as he had abandoned her? Michael chose to stay. He requested a meeting with Ms. Green. He confessed that he knew the truth about New Beginnings. He admitted his role in Eleanor's story. He asked if others at the facility were aware of his identity. Ms. Green confirmed that only she and 2 other senior staff members knew the full history. Eleanor had been insistent that Michael be treated like any other resident. She had wanted him to earn respect through his actions, not receive special treatment because of their connection. With Ms. Green's guidance, Michael began to take his responsibilities at New Beginnings more seriously. He volunteered for additional duties. He started a financial literacy program for the residents. He used his business experience, though tarnished, to help the administrative staff optimize their operations. He gradually became an integral part of the community his grandmother had created. The other residents noticed the change in Michael. They commented on his increased engagement, his newfound humility, his willingness to listen. Many of them had their own stories of abandonment and betrayal. Michael learned that pain was universal, but so was the capacity for healing. So was the possibility of starting again. 6 months after receiving Eleanor's letter, Michael made a decision. With Ms. Green's permission, he called a meeting of all residents and staff. In the main gathering room of New Beginnings, he shared his story. He revealed his identity as Eleanor Blackwood's grandson. He acknowledged his shameful treatment of the woman who had created the place they all now called home. He apologized for his past actions, not expecting forgiveness, simply offering the truth. The reaction was mixed. Some residents were angry. They had known Eleanor during her visits to New Beginnings. They had heard stories of her kindness. They found it difficult to look at Michael without seeing his betrayal. Others were more understanding. They recognized in Michael's story elements of their own failures, their own regrets, their own need for second chances. Margaret, the woman who had first mentioned Eleanor to Michael, approached him after his confession. She revealed that she had been one of Eleanor's closest friends at Pinewood. She had moved to New Beginnings at Eleanor's invitation when the facility first opened. She had known Michael's identity from the beginning. Eleanor had asked her to watch over her grandson, to help guide him if he seemed open to change. Margaret shared stories about Eleanor that Michael had never heard, about her dignity during her time at Pinewood, about her kindness to staff and residents alike, about her refusal to become bitter despite what had been done to her, about her quiet determination to create something meaningful from her experience. These stories painted a portrait of Eleanor that was both familiar and new to Michael. They showed him dimensions of his grandmother he had never appreciated. As months passed, Michael's role at New Beginnings evolved. He became an unofficial historian of the facility, sharing the story of its founding with new residents, explaining Eleanor's vision to visitors and potential donors. He worked with Ms. Green to establish a scholarship program for nursing students who committed to working in elder care. The program was named after Sarah, the nurse who had helped Eleanor at Pinewood. Michael reached out to the current owners of Blackwood Manor. The luxury hotel had not been successful. The property was for sale again. Working with the Second Chances Foundation, Michael arranged for some of the original furnishings and family heirlooms to be purchased and brought to New Beginnings. The library was recreated in the main building. Family portraits were hung in the entrance hall. Small pieces of Eleanor's heritage were integrated into the community she had built. 2 years after Eleanor's death, New Beginnings expanded. A new wing was added to accommodate more residents. The waiting list had grown as word spread about the quality of care and the strength of the community. Michael was invited to join the board of the Second Chances Foundation. His experience, as both recipient and provider of the Foundation's services, offered a unique perspective. On the 5th anniversary of New Beginnings, a memorial garden was dedicated to Eleanor Blackwood. The ceremony was attended by residents, staff, and community members. Michael spoke briefly about his grandmother's legacy, not just the buildings and programs she had funded, but the example she had set, the demonstration of how to respond to cruelty with kindness, how to answer betrayal with generosity, how to transform personal pain into collective healing. Among the attendees was Sarah, now the director of Pinewood Retirement Home. After Eleanor's death, she had discovered that her mentor had left her a significant bequest. Sarah had used the funds to purchase Pinewood. She had implemented the changes she and Eleanor had discussed over the years. The once neglected state facility was now a model of compassionate care, a sister institution to New Beginnings, another branch of Eleanor's legacy. Michael never married, never had children. He dedicated himself to continuing his grandmother's work. He lived in his modest room at New Beginnings. He ate meals with the other residents. He tended the memorial garden with his own hands. He found purpose in service, meaning in community, redemption in honoring the woman he had once wronged. 10 years after Eleanor's passing, New Beginnings Senior Care Center has become a nationally recognized model for elder care. The approach Eleanor pioneered has been adopted by facilities across the country. The combination of dignity, purpose, and community she envisioned has transformed the way society thinks about aging and vulnerability. Michael, now in his 50s, continues to live and work at New Beginnings. His hair has begun to gray. Lines have formed around his eyes. He sometimes thinks about the life he might have lived had he made different choices. The wealth he might have enjoyed had he treated his grandmother with love and respect. The family he might have raised at Blackwood Manor. But he does not dwell on these thoughts. Eleanor taught him, through her example, that looking backward serves no purpose unless it helps you move forward with greater wisdom. He focuses instead on the lives touched by her vision, the hundreds of residents who have found home within these walls, the thousands more who will come in the years ahead. Occasionally, new residents arrive at New Beginnings with stories similar to Michael's. People who have lost everything through poor choices. People who have hurt those who loved them. People seeking shelter and perhaps redemption. Michael listens to these stories with compassion. He shares his own journey when appropriate. He offers not judgment, but understanding. Not condemnation, but hope. In the memorial garden, there is a simple stone bench. Carved into its surface are words Eleanor wrote in her final letter to Michael. Words that capture the essence of her remarkable spirit. Words that guide the community she created. Our greatest legacy is not what we leave behind, but what we help others build from the ruins of what was lost. Eleanor Blackwood understood this truth. She lived it. Through her remarkable act of transforming betrayal into blessing, she created a legacy that continues to grow, a living testament to the power of forgiveness, to the possibility of redemption, to the enduring strength of love, even when it has been deeply wounded, and in the end, perhaps that is the most shocking revelation of all.